To God be the glory.
Welcome back, students, to our study of Biblical Hebrew. Now, last couple of lessons we began getting into vocabulary, and I hope that that's exciting to you, that you're able to start learning some of these words. You've gone through your alphabet and you know what those Hebrew words are and the Hebrew letters are, and now you're putting together some words and you're able to see these words and you're actually translating some Hebrew. Granted, you're just translating some simple things, but that's all it takes to really get started and really get excited about doing some of this work out of the Hebrew language, and that's one of the exciting things about learning a new language. All right, today we're going to, in this particular segment, we're going to continue into Lesson 7 in your book, in Menahem Mansour's Biblical Hebrew Step-by-Step, Volume 1. And I'm on page 44. And let's together go through the vocabulary, and I'll be pronouncing these vocabulary words for you, and also talking a little bit about them. But as usual, you need to pronounce out loud these vocabulary words, and if you're with some others, then pronounce them to each other and listen to each other. If you're by yourself, then compare your pronunciation with these words to the pronunciation that you hear me give on the tape, so that you'll learn how to pronounce these words correctly from the very start. All right, let's go then to these vocabulary words. First of all, the adjectives that we have. Now, we're looking first at the word for good. In the masculine is pronounced tov. Tov, kind of like T-O-V, tov. The feminine for this word is tovah. Tovah. Now, you've learned already that the way that you make a word feminine is you take the masculine root and then you add the comet's hey ending, and that's what we've done and are doing with all of these words. All right, next is the word bad, ra. Ra, and to make that feminine, all we do is add the comet's hey to it, and it's pronounced ra'ah. Third, the word for nice or beautiful is the word yafeh, and feminine is yafa. Now notice here that you don't add another comet's hey onto that. All we've done is, since it already had a hey at the end, rather than have two heys, then we just made it yafa. All right, the next word is for big, large, and great, and this is pronounced gadol. Gadol. All right, the feminine of that, gedolah. Gedolah. Once again, we've added the comet's hey to the end of it. All right, the word for small or little is the word katan. Katan. And to make it feminine, we add the comet's hey to the end, and it becomes ketanah. Ketanah. Old persons or beings is zaken. Zaken. And to make that feminine, we have zeknah. Zeknah. Remember, the shavah at the beginning of that means that we need to move through that very quickly. Zeknah. Like that. All right, old things is the word yashan. Yashan, and in the feminine would be yeshanah. Yeshanah. All right, young in the masculine would be sa'ir. Sa'ir. And then young in the feminine, se'irah. Se'irah. All right, the adjective black in Hebrew is shachor. Shachor. And in the feminine is shechorah. Shechorah. And the word white in Hebrew is lavan. Lavan, if you're thinking about the biblical character Laban, then that is based on his name, or a little change on his name, but it's very similar. And then the feminine is levanah. Levanah. And finally, in the adjective section, the word for holy is kadosh. That's masculine. And in the feminine, kedoshah. Kedoshah. All right, that's the adjectives, and now let's look at some nouns. All right, first of all, the word for year is the word shana. Shana. And the word for girl is yelda. Yalda. The word for family is mishpacha. Mishpacha. The word for blessing is beracha. Beracha. And the word for law, as we've already pronounced it several times, and you're familiar with that, is Torah. All right? Now looking at the word house, and they tell us in our textbook that this is a masculine word. Now why would we think that this might be a feminine word? Well, we might think it's a feminine word because it ends in the tav. And you'll recall that oftentimes a word that ends in a tav is feminine. But the word house is not a feminine word, it's masculine. And once again, you notice that the accent is not on the last syllable, and that's one of the clues that we had to know that this was not a feminine word. All right, the word house is pronounced bait. Notice it's not ba'it, it's bait. Bait. You put the accent right there on the first syllable. All right, the word for boy is the next one. And once again, the accent is on the first, penult there. And so instead of yeled, it'd be yeled. Yeled. All right. You can think of mama always having to yell at the boy. Yeled. Yeled is the Hebrew word for boy. And then the word for tree is kind of an unusual word, but it's fairly easy to remember. Etz. Etz. Now I kind of look at that particular word, and it looks like you've got 4 tree branches reaching up there with little flowers blooming on them or something. Etz. And it's a tree. And then the next word for meaning name is Shem. Shem. Name. In the introductory material, I used a number of the words in this vocabulary. When I was introducing myself, I said Shemi Dennis Petrillo, and Shemi means my name is Dennis Petrillo. And so you can say Shemi, whatever your name is, and that means my name is, and then whatever. And then the word for light is or. Or. That's the word for light. All right, so that's a little bit of dabbling with some adjectives and also with some nouns. Now, this vocabulary list, as we have mentioned in previous lessons, these lists are very, very important lists because what they do is they are words that occur a number of times in the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, just to give you an illustration of this, I want to take one of the words that's on that vocabulary list, and that's the word gadol. Now, gadol is a word that simply means great, and it's a word that does occur often in the Hebrew Scriptures, but sometimes a word like this is what is an especially significant word. All right, so we take this word gadol, and let's go to the book of Jonah. And here's a chart that I've made up that shows you how we can take this word gadol, which means great, and you can see that it's a very important word in the book. The theme of Jonah is an exposition on the greatness of God. For example, it kind of branches out into 2 different categories. You've got the greatness of Nineveh. You can see that 4 times in the Hebrew text you have the word gadol that occurs on talking about the greatness of Nineveh. Chapter 1 and verse 2, chapter 3 verses 2 and 3, and chapter 4 verse 11. Whereas the greatness of Jehovah also occurs 4 times in chapter 1 and verse 4 and verse 12 and verse 17. So it's obvious when you're studying the Hebrew text that we're trying to contrast, or God is trying to contrast His greatness with the greatness of the city. And so we look, true greatness, and that's our Hebrew word gadol, occurs 15 times, belongs to the Lord, which occurs 24 times, and that kind of looks like an H, but it's really an X, talking about 24 times. The God of the universe, and the word for God, Elohim, occurs 13 times. And so those are your 3 key words in the book of Jonah: greatness, the Lord, and God. of the universe. And his greatness is seen in the treatment of the pagan city, his control over nature, and his compassion towards the prophet. So you may have thought that the book of Jonah was basically on a number of different things, perhaps talking about the plight of a preacher or maybe some of these other things. But when we look at key words, we find that that is really not the case. That this is a book that's emphasizing and underscoring just how great God is. Gadol, the greatness of God. So that's an example of the words that we're looking at and what those words can mean to us as we begin to study the Hebrew Scriptures, and how exciting it is to go to the Hebrew Scriptures and we see words such as that, and we say, all right, now I know that word, that adjective gadol, and I know a little bit about what that means now. All right, now on the top of page 45, we have our first exposure to some prepositions. Obviously, a language cannot function without prepositions, and so let's look at these prepositions. Now these, as you can see, it says on the screen, they're unattached to words. So you might logically ask the question, does that mean then we're going to have some prepositions that are going to be attached to the words? And the answer to that is yes. But for now, we're just going to learn the detached or unattached prepositions. The word from is pronounced mean. Mean. The word with, such as being with beings, is im. Im. The word without is beli. Beli. The preposition to is el. El. On, or excuse me, upon or over is the Hebrew word al. Al. And then the word under or instead of is takat. Takat. Understand and see that the accent is above the first tav, and so you have takat. All right. Then going down to the grammar and notes right below that on page 45 in your grammar, it says study the following phrases carefully. All right, having learned some adjectives, we're able to do some minor translating. And what you need to notice is that the adjective follows the noun. For example, you want to say a good man. You would not say, like in English, good coming before man, but you say man, namely a good one, ish tov. So that's what we do. In the Hebrew, the adjective follows the noun. A good woman would be isha tova, woman, namely a good one, a good woman. A good name would be translated Shem Tov, Shem Tov. Once again, notice that the adjective follows the noun. And then if you wanted to translate into Hebrew a good year, then you would say Shana Tova. Now, what I want you to notice about a good woman and a good year is that the adjective agrees with the noun. If you have a feminine noun such as Isha, then you're going to have an adjective that agrees with that. And so here we make the adjective Tov, Tova, to agree with Isha. And this will be a tremendous help to you as you're translating the Hebrew Scriptures. Because if you're trying to see what is being qualified, what is this adjective trying to explain, you can see that whatever it agrees with in number and in gender is what it's trying to qualify. Just like the fourth one, a good year, Shana Tova. Shana, year, is a feminine word. You can see the comet's hey ending on it. And so Tova also needs to have the comet's hey, the feminine ending on that. Now in English, the adjectives remain unchanged, whether we use it with a masculine or feminine noun. So if we say a good man, the good is going to be spelled G-O-O-D. We say a good woman. Good is going to be spelled G-O-O-D. It's going to be spelled the same. But that is not the way it works in Hebrew. And although that may seem a little confusing at first, you'll find with time and translating what a tremendous help that is for there to be that distinction. And then in Hebrew, as in French, every adjective changes in agreement with its noun. All right, so you have an adjective, and that adjective is going to be expanding and qualifying a noun. Then what you have here is that it agrees with that particular noun. And so if you have a noun that's feminine, your adjective that is qualifying that noun is going to be feminine too. If it's masculine plural, then your adjective is going to be masculine plural. If your noun is feminine plural, then your adjective is going to be feminine plural. So it's going to be something that's going to all agree in number and in gender. All right, notice also that the adjective is what comes after the noun. For example, a good name, Shem Tov. You have Shem name, Tov, good, after that. Not in the order that we speak it in English. You've got to be thinking the other way around when we're working with Hebrew. All right, and also from lesson 6 in the book, we learned that the feminine ends with the comets hey. Accordingly, in order to form the feminative on the adjective, that's exactly what we do. We add the comets and then the Hebrew letter hey after that. So in our example earlier, we were talking about a good year, Shana Tova. We add Tova, not just Tov, because then you'd have a feminine word for year, Shana, and it's trying to agree with a masculine adjective, Tov, and that's not going to work. And so we need to make it Shana Tova. All right? Now, another thing to remember is that the definite article, hey, is followed by a dagesh, is joined to both the noun and the adjective. It's both the noun and the adjective. In other words, if the noun is definite, we're not just talking about a good woman. We're talking about the good woman. And if we're talking about the good woman, then we're, of course, talking about my wife. Well, we're talking about maybe your wife. The good woman, you're trying to be specific. You're talking about a specific woman, not a good woman, but the good woman, knowing that you have someone definite in mind. All right, so how are you going to do this? Well, we know that the word woman, isha, is going to go first. And then the adjective that qualifies that's going to go second. But since you're saying the woman, you're going to say ha-isha, ha-tova. The woman, namely the good one. And that's the way you do it. So if you're going to have a definite article on your noun, you're also going to have your definite article on the adjective. So the little things that you've added on to the end of the word to make it feminine, you also add on to both the noun and the adjective. And then if you add the definite article to the first of the noun, then you add that same definite article to the first of the adjective. All right, so and the best way to understand this is to take these things and understand that Ish Tov is a man, namely a good one. Or you say Isha Tova is a woman, namely a good one, a good woman. And then we translate in English a good woman. But sometimes it's a little bit confusing when we work in the Hebrew to English that we're trying to say woman good. That doesn't make much sense. That's very confusing. Woman good. Well, a woman, namely a good one. Oh, okay, that translates a good woman. And so that's what we're doing with that. All right, on the bottom of page 45 says, observe the following adjectives. All right, you have the word holy and sacred. In the masculine is the word kadosh, and in the feminine is kedosha. Now, I want to take another brief excursion here and talk about this particular adjective, which we've been talking about, and that's seen on this particular chart here. The nature of God is kadosh. Now, the word kadosh is translated in our English Bibles holy, set apart, separate. And when we do this, then we can see that we're talking about the nature of God. For example, in Isaiah chapter 6, when the angel is praising God on the throne and saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The earth is full of His glory." The angel in Hebrew is actually saying, "Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh, holy, holy, holy." This is the word that is prevalent in the book of Leviticus, and here we have Leviticus 19 and verse 2 at the bottom of this particular chart. "Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord thy God, am holy." So you shall be kadosh, for I, the Lord thy God, am kadosh. So God's nature is holy. He's set apart. He's separate. And so because of that, that's also what God wants us to be. And that's one of the beautiful things about this very tremendous word. Of course, this is also the word that's used by Peter in 1 Peter chapter 1, where he quotes this same section of Leviticus talking about that's God's nature. That's the way we need to be too. We need to be holy. And so if we're going to be holy, then we're going to be set apart. We're not going to be like other peoples. That's the meaning and the significance of kadosh. All right, the next word that he has there as an illustration in the masculine is the word gadol, and then in the feminine is gedolah. Now what he's trying to bring to our attention here is that when a word begins with the main letter, then it has the vowel comets underneath it, the little t. When a word is lengthened on the end, and it doesn't make a difference how it's going to be lengthened, but when it's lengthened on the end, then that comet is going to be completely reduced to a shavah. So rather than have kadosh in the masculine and then kadoshah in the feminine, no, they're not going to say kadoshah, they're going to say kedoshah. Kedoshah. They're going to get that comets out, and they're going to be going quickly to the end. And then with the other example of the word gadol, we're not going to have gadol in the masculine and then gadolah in the feminine. It's going to be gadol in the masculine, and the feminine is going to be gedolah. Gedolah. See how we put the E sound on that. And then same thing for the word white. Lavan, and then we go levana. Levana. So it's reduced to a not a composite, but a regular shavah in the beginning. All right, so the feminine forms of these adjectives display an important rule in Hebrew grammar, and that's what we've been talking about. If a masculine noun or adjective of the two syllables begins with the comets, the long vowel comets, a little t, such as in gadol or lavan, the comets is changed to the shavah, the two little dots, when the feminine is formed. All right. Now, before we get on to the exercises, I want to talk about the study hints that we have on page 46. First is read aloud the vocabulary at the beginning of the lesson. First read the masculine and then the corresponding feminine noun. And then learn also groups B and C of the vocabulary. All right, when dealing with adjectives for the first time, bear in mind the following. First, adjectives always follow the noun they qualify. Second, adjectives change in gender and number to agree with the noun. Third, if the noun is definite, the adjective must also be definite. If you're saying the woman, then you must say the woman, namely the good one. And so that adjective needs to agree with the noun by having the definite article. All right. Also, some rather peculiar things in this particular lesson has to do with the feminine of Yahweh. When you make that feminine is Yafa. Katan is Ketana, respectively. And what we've done with that is we have doubled the N, Ketan Na. and that's another thing that's happened. And also the comets underneath the tet is reduced to a potok. It's reduced down to the corresponding short vowel. So we've gone from a comet, the T, to a potok, which is just that straight line. Also, the rule about the feminine is very important. You will often come across this rule in one form or the other, so make sure that you understand the rule about the feminine and how the feminine works and how you make a word feminine, because it's certainly going to be things that we'll be seeing often in the scriptures and in the rest of these lessons. All right, now let's look at some of the exercises that we have. First, in the exercise A on the bottom of page 46, we have been asked to write the following the following word. So let's go to the chalkboard here, and I'll give some examples, and I'll take the odds, and you're responsible for doing the evens. All right? They want us, first of all, to give the feminine of Tov. All right? Tov. That's masculine. Now what do you do to make that feminine? Well, if you answered, you add the comets, hey, then you answered correctly. All right, let's drop down to number 3. You're responsible for doing the evens. I'll help you out with the odds. All right, we have the word beautiful, which is yape. Excuse me, yafe. I keep wanting to make that a P, and it's an if. All right, but if we wanted to make that feminine, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. This is one of those examples where, since it already ends in a comet, let's just go ahead and leave, or it ends in a hey, let's just go ahead and do this. So we have the comet's hey ending, and that's the feminine beautiful, yafa. So you need to go and tell your wife that she is meod yafa, very beautiful. All right, she won't know what you're saying, but you're saying a good thing. All right, and then on the next one, they want us to take the word old, zakin, and make that particular word a feminine. All right, so here we know that we'll take away the ending noon and make it the final noon with the comet's hey. And because this began with the comets, what happens to the comets when you add something on to the end of a word? If it began with the comets, it's reduced to a shavah. Remember that rule? It's reduced to a shavah. So this would be pronounced zekana. Zekana. All right, so we've added something on to the end of a word. This, in the masculine, began with the comets, but now it's been reduced to a shavah. All right, number 7, they want us to take the word for boy, yeled. Remember, oh mom yelling at the boy? Yeled. That looks like this. All right, but when we add the feminine onto that, it becomes yalda. Yalda. So kind of an unusual thing on that. That also has a dagesh there, and so you need to remember the peculiarity about the word for girl. All right, and then the last one is the word for uncle, number 9, dode. This is a simple one. To make that feminine, if we want to go from uncle to aunt, what do? Well, we just add that comet's hey. So that'd be pronounced how? Doda. Doda. All right, now those are some examples. All right, now the next thing that the assignment asks us to do is to give the feminine of the following. For example, in number 1, we have ish sa'ir, which translated a young man. All right, how would you make that feminine? All right, I'm not going to write this on the board. I want you to hear it, and then you write it down yourself. All right, we want to take this, a young man, and make it instead a young woman. Instead of ish sa'ir, we go Isha, Se'ira. Number 3, we have Hadod Ha-Zaken, the old uncle. All right, if we wanted to make this instead of an old uncle, an old aunt, then how are we going to do that? Well, by adding the feminine endings onto this, we have, instead of Hadod Ha-Zaken, we have Ha-Doda, Ha-Zekna, Zekna. And by looking at that, what you're seeing here is all we're doing is we're adding the comet hey and to these words. But when the first word, the first letter of the first word, had the comet, the T, that's reduced to the Shava, the 2 dots. All right, number 5 has the good boy, Hayeled Hatov. All right, instead of a good boy, we want to say the good girl. How do we say that? Well, we would say Ha Yelda Hatova. And that's how we've changed it. Very, very simple to change it from a good boy to a good girl. Like when boy and girl, you're changing a completely different word. Not so in Hebrew. Don't have to worry about all those changes. The letters are basically going to stay unchanged. You have the word for boy, Yeled, you have Yod, Lamed, and then Daleth. Same 3 letters, also for girl. It's just you add the comet hey on the end, and that's what makes it a girl. All right, then on the beginning of the next page, we have this on the chart so that we can look at it on the screen. It says on top of page 48, letter C, translate the following into English. All right, once again, I'll be looking at these, just the odds, and you're responsible to do the evens. Actually, you're responsible to do all of them. I'm just helping you out a little bit with the odd ones. All right, the first one, how would you pronounce that? All right, look at it. Say it aloud the way that you would translate it. All right, now if you said Mish Fachat, or Facha, then you said it correctly. Mish Fa. Notice that you've got the pay with the dagesh, and it's got the accent mark above it. So it'd be Mish Fachat. Facha, I want to get that ta on there, but Facha. And then you have Gedolah. Translation of that would be a great family. You say, now wait a minute though, Gedolah is in the feminine. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is because the word for family is also feminine. All right, next we want to say, number 3, we have Lila Tov. I want to translate that. Lila Tov, that's good night. Good night. And so when you're talking with someone and you want to bid them a farewell, you say Lila Tov. When I began these tapes, I said Yom Tov, which meant good day. So this is good night. Lila Tov. All right, number 5, we have Min Ha-Bayit El Ha-Sadeh. All right, how do we translate this? Min is from the house, Ha-Bayit, from the house to the field. All right, then going up to the next one on number 7. Reading that, how would you pronounce that? On number 7. Al Hasus Ha-Lavan. All right, that's upon the white horse. Upon the horse, namely the white one. All right, and then on number 9, we have Takat Etz. Takat Etz. And that simply means under a tree. All right, then going down to the next exercise, it says rewrite the following nouns and add an appropriate adjective and translate the result into English. All right, such as example, a big horse. You have Sus, and you want to make it a big horse. Sus Gadol, a big horse. All right, for the sake of time, I've written just some adjectives that you could change these, and you probably ought to, of these on the board. All right, we have number 1 up here. we want to add an adjective to Ben. That's son. All right, what kind of son we have? Well, let's make him a good son. So son, namely a good one. Ben Tov. All right, number 3, we have the word house. Ha-bayit. Well, what kind of house we want to talk about? Well, let's make it the great house. We have the house. Therefore, we have to say the great one. The house, namely the great one, which would be translated the great house. All right, and number 5, we got sadeh. All right, that means field. Well, what kind of a field do we want to have? Well, how about like some of the fields in Colorado? We'll make it yape. And so saying, well, I thought that field would be feminine because it ends in the hay. Well, it doesn't end in the comet hay. It just ends in a hay. And so we have our adjective, agree with it. This is masculine. This is masculine. And we have here a beautiful field. All right, dropping down to number 7, we have the word night. What kind of a night should we have? Well, how about a holy one? So we have Lila Kadosh, a holy night. All right, and then we've been given the word the book, Ha Sefer. How about the good book? Ha Tov, Ha Sefer, Ha Tov. All right, that's a good example of that. All right, and then in exercise E, it says translate the following into Hebrew. All right, I'll quickly write down some of these on the board, and then you'll be responsible for doing the rest of those. Once again, actually doing all of them, but doing the ones in addition to the ones that I give you. All right, we have number 1, from a house. All right, the word from is the word mean, and from a house, not the house, but just a house. So that's the word ba'it, and so that's the answer to the first one, from a house. All right, number 3, they want us to translate without the book. All right, the word without is beni, and then without the book. All right, beni ha sefer, the accent right there, without the book. All right, number 5, we have under the house. All right, our word under is takat, the accent right there, under the house. Ha, ba, eat, under the house. All right, and then we have virtually some more of the same in exercise F. All right, but before we conclude this particular lesson, let's go down to our rapid reading on the bottom of this, and we also have this on the screen. And we will read this together. Once again, I'll try to go slow, and you can practice on this yourself. Ve ahavta lere'aka kamoka hakol kol Yaakov ve havadayim yedei Esav. All right, that's from Genesis chapter 27 and verse 22, also Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18. All right, so you're doing some reading, and that's good. Now, I want you to notice that Lesson 8 is a quiz on Lessons 1 through 7. This particular lesson is going to be your midterm exam. What you need to do is you need to study chapters 1 through 7. Study them very thoroughly. Study those vocabulary where you know and you're able to recognize instantly the meaning of those vocabulary words. Do not go on and look at lesson number 8, which is the quiz. Wait until you're ready to take that quiz, and then when you're ready, sit down at a time that you can do that and take the quiz. And after you're done taking the quiz, grade it yourself with a different colored pen, and then give that to your instructor, and they will make the appropriate grade depending on the number that you have missed.